Welcome to Be Smart, the podcast about money, the podcast about highbrow money, lowbrow money, and everything in between, and how not to be an idiot with your money, because there's a lot of that going around. I'm going to tell you a story. I was 27 years old. I got hired by Lehman Brothers in 2001, and I was living in California, packed all my stuff, packed my cat, and moved across the country to New York, and I started a new life. Used to be a Coast Guard officer, now I was going to be a Wall Street guy, and just big change. So when I started at Lehman hired 300 MBAs globally, 300 associates to work at Lehman, and 80 of them were in sales and trading. So I was in this group of 80 MBAs in sales and trading. It was awesome, just a great time. So they took all of our resumes and they put them in a book. So they handed out this book to everybody. So everybody's kind of like comparing their resumes. And I'm looking at my resume and I'm like, oh my God, I have pretty close to the worst resume in this entire book. Like, I'm just a chump. Like, I'm a nobody compared to these people. You know, I was different. They all went to Ivy League schools, and a lot of them had worked in the industry. And I was like, what the hell is going on? You know, I came from the Coast Guard. I was a blue collar guy. So, and I was making $45,000 a year working in the Coast Guard. So anyway, a very good friend of mine, his name is Jason, he puts together this dinner, and I think it was somebody's birthday, I'm not sure, but he puts together this dinner at a place in New York called Churrascaria Plataforma, which is a Brazilian steakhouse. And I'd never been there before. It was brand new at the time. It was like one of the fancy new restaurants in town. And I was like, okay, I really didn't know what to expect. So I get in there, and it's this super nice restaurant. I mean, it's just fantastic. But a Brazilian steakhouse, if you've never been to one, there's like this salad bar on steroids. This is a giant salad bar. So you get some stuff off the salad bar first, and you come and sit down, and you have this little coaster. And the coaster is red on one side and green on the other. So if you put it on green, they start bringing you meat on skewers. And they slice off a piece of meat, they put it on your plate, they go away, and then they bring a different kind of meat and a different kind of meat, and they're just going to keep bringing you meat until you turn the coaster over to red. So I ate so much food. I was like, I had a hollow leg. I was like just pigging out at this place. So now, I keep in mind, you know, when I lived in California, when I was in the Coast Guard, I would go out to eat once a week with my wife, and we went to this very cheap Chinese place, and it would be $15 for the two of us. And keep in mind, this is, 20 years ago, so things were a lot cheaper back then. But we would literally pay $15 for dinner, and now I'm in New York City. So anyway, they bring the bill, and we're going to split the bill 12 ways. Which what I was a little resentful about, because some people were ordering bottles of wine and desserts and all this stuff. And I'm like, now I got to pay for everybody else's crap. Anyway, my portion of the bill comes to $80. And I'm like, oh my God, $80. Like, how am I going to afford this? I'm not going to be able to afford to live in New York. This is insane. I had never spent $80 on a meal in my entire life. Never. I had never done that. And everybody else, it's like no big deal. They take the credit cards out, they're paying $80, and it's like painful to me. I'm like, oh, this is so bad. $80. So I wasn't like a douche about it, but I was really stressed out. Okay, I was very stressed out by this meal, and it probably showed. And here's the irony of this, right? Out of the 12 people sitting at that table, I probably had the most money. Okay. First of all, because I saved like crazy. Second of all, I bought a condo, like a townhouse in California, and it doubled, and I made a ton of cash. So, at the time, my net worth was about $200,000. I had just like $15,000 in student loan debt. Like, I was in pretty good financial shape. And a lot of the other people at the dinner, for sure they were spending a lot of money and they had way more in student loans. Like I probably was the richest guy at the table and I wouldn't spend $80 for a dinner, So, you know what that means? It means I was a CF. Now, I when I was doing the radio show, I talked about being a CF. Although on the radio, I couldn't say what CF stands for. Now I can. CF stands for cheap fuck. That's what I was. I was a cheap fuck. And that's how I got to $200,000. Man, I was tight with a buck. Like, I was really cheap. And I probably wasn't a lot of fun to be around at that dinner because I was worried about how much it was going to cost. So, I have to tell you the origin story of the CF. Why I say CF, how this happened. So when I moved to New York, I actually lived in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I used to get my hair cut at this place. I don't remember the name of it. It was like First Street Barbershop or Second Street Barbershop. I don't remember. And it was this little hole in the wall place. It was run by drag queens, like legitimate professional drag queens, like the best. They were the best. So the guy that cut my hair, his name was Kyle, and he was Liza Minnelli when he was on stage. There was another guy in there. He was Cher when he was on stage. And they had like their glamour shots of them in the barbershop. And I mean, they weren't just passable. Like they looked exactly like Liza Minnelli and Cher. It was unbelievable. And these guys screwed around all the time. Like they played pranks on people. They had like this little fart machine. There was like this little speaker. They'd put it outside in the plant and they'd press the fart button when people would walk by. I mean, they were just constantly screwing around. It was a huge amount of fun. So anyway, one day I go in there, I get my hair cut, and you kind of go in the back room to pay. So I go in the back room. And it was a $14 haircut. So this was 2001. It was a $14 haircut. I would tip $4, which is like a 30% tip, which isn't, it's an okay tip. It's a pretty good tip. So in the appointment book is sitting right there. I'm looking in the appointment book, and next to some of the people's names, it says CF next to them. And I'm like, what's the CF? They're like cheap fuck. And I'm like, oh my God. So I was very happy I did not have CF next to my name. But it's funny because, as cheap as I was, and I was really, really cheap. As cheap as I was, I've never been a bad tipper. I would say that back then, 20 years ago, I was an okay tipper, not amazing, but, good. Now I'm like an amazing tipper, but I've never been a bad tipper. So I focus on this a lot. And you might wonder why I talk about this all the time. Because if you listen to Dave Ramsey's show or anybody else's show, like they're talking about people who spend too much, people who have to have the BMW, whatever, people who have to have the fancy clothes, the big house, whatever. They talk about that aspect of spending all the time. And for sure, there's consequences to that. There's consequences to spending too much. You run up debt and you can go bankrupt. Like there's real consequences. It's bad. But nobody talks about when people spend too little, which is the opposite problem. And most people are one or the other. There's not a lot of people in between, okay? And if you are one of these people who spends too little, you're not going to go bankrupt. You'll never go bankrupt. You're always going to be fine. But what happens is that you destroy relationships, right? Because you're such a cheap bastard. You don't pay for stuff. You're not generous. And people get sick of your shit. So not spending enough is just as big of a problem as spending too much, for sure. I have a very good buddy who is a CF. I mean, he might be my best friend. It's just one of my best friends, and his behavior is appalling. It is terrible, and we're still friends. We always will be friends. But man, it is tough hanging out with this guy sometimes. So this was, I want to say 5 years ago. I went to Atlantic City with him. Atlantic City is bad. They used to, there's a hotel there called the Chelsea, which is not a casino. It's just a hotel, and it's next to the Tropicana. And the Chelsea, when it opened, was really nice. Like, it was a great alternative to staying at the casinos. And I love staying at the Chelsea. I went back there 5 years ago, and it was pretty run down. It was not what it used to be. But they have a diner in the bottom floor of the Chelsea, and it's called Teplitsky's. So we go in this diner, and we're having breakfast. And we have this waitress who is, she's gorgeous. It's like, she's amazing and nice and a great waitress and great service. And I'm like, it's like a Saturday morning. Atlantic City is always deserted anyway. We're like the only people in there. Like, they're not getting any business. And she's just doing an amazing job. And I even said to my friend, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, she's terrific. Like, this is great service. This is awesome. And he totally agreed. So the bill came to $25, and I got like a bagel or a bowl of cereal or something. We just got coffee. So it was a $25 bill. So, this is my friend, the CF, and he pays the bill. He's like, I got it. So he pays the bill, and then he gets up to leave, and I'm like, I better look at the bill. And I open it up, and on a $25 bill, he tipped $1. $1. So now I'm kind of panicking. So I pull out my wallet, and I'm going to put some money down. I'm going to put like a 5, a 10, something. All I have is 20s. And at that moment, I made the wrong decision. What I should have done was put down a 20, right? That was the right thing to do. But I didn't. I was like, I can't put down a 20. And I left it there, and she got tipped $1. $1. I got more stories than that. I could do this all day long. It's amazing. So this is why I focus on people who do not spend enough. The other day, it was yesterday, the day before, somebody called me generous. You know what? I'm 47 years old. That's the first time in my entire life that somebody has called me generous. I'm not kidding. Nowadays, I am very, very generous. I'm not going to brag about it. This isn't really the place for that. It all comes down to balance. Okay. And there's lots of people who are generous, and they're generous with money they don't have. That happens a lot. You have somebody who does not have a lot of money, and they're very generous, and they put themselves in a position financially that they shouldn't be in because they're overly generous relative to how much money they make, and I don't consider that to be a virtue. Okay. If you're so generous that you're tomahawking yourself financially, it's not a good thing. It comes down to balance. So what does it mean to be generous? It means buying dinner once in a while, when you go out with friends. It means you go into Dunkin' Donuts, you get a coffee, and you put $20 in the tip jar just because. I suggest you try that sometimes just to see how it feels. Being generous means buying a necklace for your wife for no reason. Not birthday, not Christmas. Just buy a piece of jewelry that is a little too expensive. By the way, I stopped doing that with my wife. She has jewelry that she likes. She wears it every day. She's too lazy to take it on and off, so I can't buy her any more jewelry. I have some very generous friends and subscribers. So I'm DJing a party November 12th in New York City, throwing a party, and it's for charity. It's for St. Francis Animal Center here in Georgetown, South Carolina. Got to save the cats. And I've had several people donate $1,000 or more, which is unbelievable. And I'm not even soliciting donations. All I'm doing is I'm taking the link. I'm like, buy tickets. The ticket revenue goes to charity. And people say, well, I can't go to the party. How can I contribute? So then I'm like, okay, well, I send them the link to St. Francis and they donate several $1,000s, One thing I will say about being generous, check your motives, okay? Check your motives. Why are you being so generous? Are you trying to be Mr. Cool Guy Big Shooter? Or are you genuinely trying to help someone out? Always check your motives. Never do anything for ego or status. Don't be Mr. Cool Guy Big Shooter. One last thing before we go. I'm going to give you a little thought experiment. I'm going to give you a list of 5 things, and you have to choose 3. You can't choose 4. You can't choose 5. You have to choose 3. So here's the list of 5 things: work, family, fitness, fun, and sleep. Work, family, fitness, fun, and sleep. You have to choose 3. And that's life. Life is all about your priorities with those 5 things. Okay. I can tell you what I pick. I pick work and sleep and fun. I work all the time. I love to work. I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. I need my sleep. And I have a lot of fun with music and parties and travel and stuff like that. 99% of Wall Street guys pick work, family, and fitness. They all do the same thing. They pick work, family, and fitness, and they're all miserable. No fun, no sleep, but they do have great abs. So whenever I ask this question, I get a bunch of different responses, but nobody ever picks fun. People will pick work, family, fitness. They'll pick family, fitness, sleep. But they never pick fun, and fun is important. You have to make it a priority. You have to make it a priority, which means giving up something else. And people are like, well, I can't give up family. That's the most important thing. Well, you have to give up something. I gave up fitness, and I'm about 235 pounds of chewed bubble gum because fitness is just not as important to me. And I have to pick sleep. If I don't get enough sleep, I don't have everything else. So think about what 3 things you would pick: work, family, fitness, fun, and sleep. And don't forget to have fun. I'm Jared Dillian, and you're listening to Be Smart. See you next time.